Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Season 2 has now been out for a solid 3 days and is still, up to this point, feeling like a surprisingly good time for those of us who are actually partaking in it and checking it out. Personally, I've been devoting myself to the Rogue to start off this time around, just for a bit of a change in pace, and I have to say, it's feeling just excellent. The speed is fantastic, the damage is insane, and it's all in building yourself to take advantage of different combos. Yesterday, I took down the Torment capstone dungeon at level 53, so 17 levels underscaled, and I did that in an unfinished version of the build that I'm going to present to you today, which is my take on a Season 2 updated Death Trap build. The whole point of this style of build, for those who are new to Rogue this season, is that it is similar to Twisting Blades, but with a ton of synergy based around Poison Trap and Death Trap that has in a ton of utility, pulling enemies in towards you and into your traps to help you stack your damage up nicely without having to dash around everywhere chasing one enemy at a time. And it also boasts some pretty nasty single target damage too, because part of what makes this function is the ability to reset trap cooldowns by hitting enemies that are affected by your traps. So big beefy enemies like elites, bosses, enemies that overlevel you, that's where this type of thing really shines brightly, which makes it perfect for this sort of midsection of the game, especially because it doesn't require a single unique to function, only legendaries. Though that said, there are of course a couple of uniques that you can slot in once you get them. All that said, let's dive into how to put this all together yourself, starting off with the skill points and why we take what we do, then diving into the specialization of choice, some talk about our legendaries of note and any uniques I'd slot in if I had them, then of course the Vampiric Powers for the build, our early Paragon Board as well, and then any tips or advice that I have for actually playing this build for yourself. Starting off then with the skill points, we are of course going to be taking Puncture as our basic skill. Even with the recent changes, it's just too good to pass up on, especially with the way that it synergizes even further in Season 2 with certain Vampiric powers. We're also going to be grabbing Enhanced Puncture for the bonus energy, and Fundamental Puncture 2 to give it vulnerable application chance as well. After that, we're going to be picking up Twisting Blades, and of course you want all 5 ranks as this is our main damage spamming ability. We're also going to be taking Enhanced Twisting Blades for the bonus return damage, and also Improved Twisting Blades to daze any enemy affected by this skill. After that, we're going to be taking 3 ranks of the Sturdy passive for 12% damage reduction from close enemies, as well as 3 ranks of Siphoning Strikes for an 85% lucky hit chance against close enemies to restore 3% of your maximum life. These points specifically, these 3 can be redirected to Concussive down here if you want to have more bonus crit chance against enemies after you knock them down, but you only want to make this choice if you're feeling tanky enough and you just want more damage at the cost of survivability. Then, other than that, we move on to the Agility node cluster anyways, and here we are taking Shadow Step, mostly just for the Unstoppable proc as a sort of get out of jail free card for crowd control, but we also are going to be grabbing Enhanced Shadow Step, which gives you bonus crit chance when we use this as well, and then also Disciplined Shadow Step to reduce the cooldown when hitting an enemy with this that hasn't been hit by Shadow Step in the last 4 seconds. We also take 3 ranks of the Weapon Mastery passive over here, which gives you either 15% bonus damage against healthy enemies if you are using daggers, or 9% bonus damage in general if you're using swords. Both choices are viable this season. Daggers are arguably just a touch better, but their value is very, very close right now. Then we're going to be grabbing 1 rank of Rapid Gambits for a reduction to our evade cooldown, and 1 rank of Trick Attack to knock down any dazed enemy that we get a crit against. This is especially good for taking on elites a bit above your pay grade, as you can oftentimes just sort of chain stagger them so they can't even do anything other than their passive effects. After that, we're going to be grabbing Poison Trap here, a main part of our build, and we're also grabbing Enhanced Poison Trap, of course, for the guaranteed knockdown on enemies hit when this triggers, as well as countering Poison Trap here, which gives Poison Trap a 30% chance to reset your imbuement cooldown when triggered. Then we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of the Exploit passive for 18% increased damage on healthy and injured enemies, which covers just over half of the health bar of most enemies, and then 3 ranks of Malice as well for bonus damage against vulnerable enemies, which I have an extra rank in from my amulet. Then we're going to be going for the full 5 ranks on Poison Imbuement as an added effect for our Twisting Blades to stack up a lot more damage, and we're also going to be getting Enhanced Poison Imbuement for bonus duration on this effect, as well as Blended Poison Imbuement, which makes critical hits with poison imbued skills also apply a bonus 75% poison damage, which is quite nice. After that, we're going to be grabbing 1 rank of the Deadly Venom passive for 3% bonus poison damage, mostly just as a gateway for us to get 1 rank of Alchemical Advantage. This gives you bonus attack speed per poisoned enemy around you. Attack attack speed is incredible, but you don't really need to stack multiple ranks of this passive to get it. It just gets the job done even with one rank on larger packs. Then we move on to our ultimate cluster, and here we are of course grabbing the namesake of this build, which is Death Trap. This does a ton of damage in a big radius, it pulls enemies in that are nearby so that you can stack them up nicely in the middle, and it also reduces its own cooldown if it actually kills an enemy, which it quite often does with the damage numbers that it does. After that, we're just going to be taking a ton of passives in this cluster, one rank of Innervation for lucky hit chance to regenerate some energy, mostly as a gateway for 3 ranks of Second Wind. Every 100 energy you spend gives you a bonus 15% lucky hit chance for 5 seconds. Combine that with our attack speed and we get a ton of lucky hit procs, which is what makes this build truly reach the peaks that it can. After that, we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of Trap Mastery. This is bonus crit chance against vulnerable enemies when either poison or death trap activates, which is quite frequently with the way that this build is made. And then we're also going to be taking 1 rank of Aftermath, which just gives you a nice little bit of 30 energy after casting Death Trap. This is mostly just so we are guaranteed to have a little bit of extra energy after using our ultimate, as that is our main spam window and you want to make sure you have the energy for it. Then we have 1 rank in Adrenaline Rush for 5% increased energy regeneration, mostly just as a gateway to get 3 ranks of Haste, which gives you 15% increased move speed when above 50% energy and 15% attack speed when below 50% energy. Then finally we have our key passive for the build, and of course we're going to be taking Exposure for the 25% lucky hit chance against enemies affected by your traps to reduce our trap cooldowns by 20% and also drop a cluster of stun grenades. That's it for the skills then, so let's briefly discuss your choice of specialization. Inner Sight does sort of work for this, but once your build is properly up and running, energy should never be an issue anymore, which instead makes combo points the ideal use of this just as a damage increasing tool. More often than not, you don't even actually need to actively consider building up the combo points in between, but they're just actually a bonus if you ever do need to wait a moment between twisting blades to actually hit high energy. For the most part, I just walk around holding down the puncture button while hitting other buttons in between. It's pretty simple. Past that, we get into our legendaries and equipment, and this is where it gets quite fun, as again, not a single unique is required to get this going and feeling incredibly strong, they're just sort of the cherries on top. Starting off then with our two-handed weapon slot, we of course have the Blade Dancer aspect for the double effectiveness. This just increases what twisting blades is capable of such a ridiculous amount that it's impossible to ignore. Then on our amulet for a 50% bonus effectiveness, we have the accelerating aspect. This gives you up to 38% bonus attack speed for 5 seconds when you get a crit with a core skill. Then on our one-handed weapons, we have Edgemaster's aspect for up to 20% bonus damage on any skill cast depending on how much energy you have, as well as Retribution, mostly for the bonus damage against stunned enemies, and the way that stacks with our key passive, dropping stun grenades under us constantly on your enemies. And even on bosses, that passive can actually trigger a stagger relatively quickly, then the bonus damage applies while they're staggered for even more bonus anyways. Past that, we have our rings, both running resource-based legendaries, one of which being the Ravenous aspect for bonus energy regeneration for a few seconds after killing a vulnerable enemy, which of course we are doing constantly. Then just the Umbral aspect for energy restored anytime that you crowd control an enemy, which is pretty much just every attack that we do in this build. Then on our gloves, our final offensive legendary is Pestilent Points, which gives a poison imbuement effect to every third cast of Puncture. We cast Puncture constantly, we have ways to boost our basic attack damage, and so this actually just winds up being quite a decent boon, though it is the first legendary on the chopping block once you start talking about replacing things later down the line. Then for our movement legendary, we have the Ghostwalker aspect, bonus move speed and the ability to walk through enemies while unstoppable and for 4 seconds afterwards. This combos with our Shadow Step quite nicely, and it's just a very strong legendary in general. Then for our defensive slots, we have the Might aspect for 20% damage reduction after casting a basic skill, which again, we are just constantly doing. We also have the Disobedience aspect for a bunch of bonus armor that builds up as you fight off enemies, and then finally we have the aspect of Shared Misery to give us lucky hit chance to spread crowd control effects when hitting enemies, making things like Knockdown and Daze and Slow even more oppressive and synergizing well with some of our other effects as well. This here is what I've been running, and it's extremely effective, but it's worth noting that this can improve with some uniques whenever they do happen to drop. The one that we all want but probably won't get for a bit is Tybalt's Will. This new unique simply increases your damage while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after by a ridiculous amount. Combine that with Shadow Step and you've got something absolutely lovely going. And it's worth mentioning, when you do get these for yourself and slot them in, you should replace the Ghostwalker aspect on the boots with Ravenous for a bonus Shadow Step charge, which will allow you to keep 100% uptime on that unique's effect. Other than that, either of the unique daggers has a really strong place in this build. Condemnation has strong synergy with combo points, the Conjar has strong synergy with things that favor attack speed, and we love both of those things, so both of these have a really good place here if you happen to get them for yourself. Past that, as far as general gearing practices, you want bonus ranks to Twisting Blades as much as you can get them, as early as you can get them, bonus ranks to Poison Imbuement Inhuman is really nice too. Trap arm speed, trap cooldown reduction are both great. Crit chance is fantastic, though we don't really need to focus as hard on things like crit damage this season as we have until now. Crits just also happen to activate some of our effects within the build, such as knockdowns and the accelerating aspect. Defensively, you definitely want to start building up elemental resistances where you can, as well as getting a couple rolls of total armor percent increase is really good too, as are rolls of bonus maximum health on gear as well. And after that then, let's move on to our Season 2 specific section, which is the Vampiric Powers. Rogue has the lovely problem that there are just too many good ones of these for us. There are more than 5 that we want, but sadly you can only use 5, so we have to limit ourselves. Right at the top of the barrel then, you want Accursed Touch as soon as you can physically get it, as you can unlock it from doing Blood Harvest. The lucky hit chance to apply Vampiric Curse is super consistent in this build, especially with our slight bit of bonus lucky hit chance. When you pair that with the Prey on the Weak power as well, you just get constant vulnerable procs on every enemy that you fight, and they take a fair bit of bonus damage as well as a result. Then we also want the combo of Moonrise, which boosts your attack speed every time you use a basic skill up to 5 stacks, and increases your basic skill damage and your movement speed when you reach 5 stacks. Mostly we use this for the attack speed increase. The damage is nice though, and the movement speed is especially good because of the Ravenous power. This gives you lucky hit chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed. My passive bonus from this currently is 46% bonus attack speed, which is pretty great, but I also have a bunch of other effects that activate during combat to make this even more potent. Then finally, your last slot is a little bit of a choice. For damage, you absolutely want Hemomancy. This one is just a little bit broken right now. It has extremely wide range, and it triggers off of weird interactions. It's not quite as busted as the Barbarheart was in Season 1, at least not for every class, and Rogue is one that benefits less from it than others as we have a lower maximum health pool. But that said, it's still extremely good. If you want more survivability instead of this though, you can absolutely justify replacing it with the Undying power. This will heal you for 3% of your life as healing every single time that you cast a skill, doubled if you're below 50% health. Our attack speed in this build is insane. It's one of our goals to reach really high attack speed, so the healing that we generate just from this is absolutely nuts, which makes the distinction clear. Hemomancy for damage, Undying for survivability. And with that covered, let's quickly go over the bare bones beginning of our Paragon board up to where it is now. With the starting board, of course, you want to head up the right side through the damage increase rare node, and then snake along this path to get all the dexterity, and grab the glyph socket, inside of which you want to put in the closer glyph for bonus damage to your cutthroat skills, which is of course twisting blades. Then you want to wrap down and grab all the resist rare node down here, which is very useful now. Grab the armor rare node in the top right as well nearby, then head up through the damage rare node to progress to the next board, for which we're going to be taking the deadly ambush board on its default rotation. Then you want to head up the left side, making sure that you take a stop at the trapper rare node for bonus damage both to enemies using your trap skills, but also to enemies that are just affected by your trap skills in general. After that, you want to wrap around, of course, and grab the legendary power itself, which gives you 23% increased critical strike damage to enemies that are affected by any of your traps. Then you just want to go up the left side, grabbing the strength along the way, and then stopping at the glyph socket, in which this time you want to be putting in exploit for bonus damage to vulnerable targets. The additional bonus isn't all that important on this one anymore because we're going to be making everything vulnerable all the time, but just bonus damage against them is still really good because, again, everything will be vulnerable all the time. Then after that, you just want to grab all the rare nodes in the radius, all the magic nodes. They're all really good for us. Damage reductions, damage increases, all related to traps because we're constantly going to be doing traps. And that pretty much does it for now. That's all I've got at this point, but it's a really strong starting point for this build. And now that we've gone over all the things that you need to know to actually put the build together, let's talk a bit about how to play it. Basically, your goal is to try and group up your enemies as much as possible. So pull as large a pack as you can handle, then stick down Poison Trap and Death Trap. The Death Trap will pull enemies right into the center and trigger the Poison Trap with all of them standing inside of it. Then you want to just use Puncture and Twisting Blades as necessary to do big damage on a giant group of enemies, and proc Exposure to reset the cooldowns on your trap so you can just do it again right after. Basically, you want to just use Poison Imbuement on cooldown. Shadow Step is mostly used to proc Unstoppable and get you out of CC, but if you are confident that there are no crowd control effects around you right now, you can instead use this to target priority enemies by giving yourself just a bit of bonus crit chance against them. For the most part, this loop is very simple once you get used to it, but it does feel extremely satisfying, and especially with the Vampiric Powers in Season 2, the attack speed gets absolutely absurd, making this build stronger than any other previous iteration of a Death Trap rogue within the game, and it feels really fun to use too. And that's it then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this showcase, and I hope you enjoy actually playing this build yourself if you decide to give it a try too, and I highly recommend that you do. It's really quite enjoyable, and it's not all that hard to put together either. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.